We are so grateful for you coming out in this wonderful, shiny weather. My name is Teresa Haley. I am the Springfield branch president of the NAACP, as well as the Illinois State Conference president. I want to bring up a very special person in my life. She and her husband, Nancy Sage, come on up and bring greetings, please. Let's give her a hand as she comes forward.
As Teresa said, I'm Nancy Sage, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of Springfield. And I'd like to welcome all of you to this evening's gathering. Teresa Haley, as she just said, President of the NAACP, invited the Jewish Federation to partner with the NAACP to call together this Unity Summit. The NAACP and the Jewish community have decades of experience working together to combat racism, hate, and bigotry, and to advance the cause of justice and equality in our society. I would like to, at this moment, read this following statement from the Jewish Federation. The Jewish Federation of Springfield, Illinois, abhors any demonstration of hate, discrimination, and bias targeting any group or individual on the basis of race, religion, skin color, sexual identity, gender identity, ethnicity, disability, or national origin. It is particularly alarming when such behavior may involve a representative of the law enforcement community. We understand that state, local, and national law enforcement officials are actively involved in investigating a potential case relating to a former local law enforcement agent. We appreciate that those involved in the active investigation are meeting with us tonight, the Jewish Federation, with other targeted organizations, with community leaders, with diverse groups within the community, and with interested citizens to explain the investigation and review process and to respond to questions and concerns. Tonight, we will provide an opportunity for panelists to describe how they are addressing the situation, for the audience to pose questions to them and to express their concerns, and for all of us to leave with a greater understanding of all perspectives and a commitment to move forward. And I'm going to bring it back to Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. So at this time, the NAACP was founded on Christian principles, and so was the Jewish Federation. And regardless of what you believe and who you believe, we're going to ask that you pray with us tonight. So I'm going to ask my pastor to come forward, Dr. Rosser, and Rabbi Goldstein, please come forward and offer up a word of prayer. So if you don't pray, pray.
In Jewish teaching, we have a very special prayer for which we hope for all people. I'm going to give you a little bit of the Hebrew and then the English as we continue. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Grant peace, we're told. There's nothing better that we can find than peace. Grant peace to all of us, to each of us, here, there, and further away. We ask God to help us to find a way to work together in our communities so that we bring peace and wholeness and well-being to all. And may all of us join together and say, Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Let us pray. And God, we thank you for this day, a day we have yet have seen, but now are experiencing. We thank you for the safety and the health of each one that is here today. God, we ask that you grant courage for both the elected, the appointed, and the various community leaders that are gathered in this building. Protect and watch over them Watch over their families. Grant wisdom as you see fit. Allow them to make sound decisions in their leadership capacities. Open our ears tonight so that we may hear exactly what we need to hear. And let us have patience with one another, even in times when we don't agree. Let us succeed and measure our success, not by the tone that we raise, but by the truth that is heard. It is in the name of Jesus the Christ that we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Church can say amen, it's okay. So again, thank you all so much for being here. Right before coming here, I had an opportunity to meet with the new director from the FBI, and I'm going to ask him to come forward and just say a few words. Let's welcome him as he comes forward.
Good evening. My name is Dave Nans. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI Springfield Field Office, and I just wanted to let everyone know that protecting civil rights is a priority for the FBI. We have a team dedicated to doing that, not only here in Springfield, but in our satellite offices throughout. We cover 84 of the 102 counties in Illinois, and I just want to encourage members of the community, to the extent you come across issues where someone's civil rights may have been violated, we want you to bring that to our attention so that we can have people take a look at that. So, and having said that, I look forward to learning from the panel and hearing from the community. So thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. Let's give him another hand. Before I get to my panel, they're not going anywhere, so I'm just glad they're here. I'm going to ask Ken Page to come forward and bring greetings and say a few words. Ken?
Good evening. I'm Ken Page, president of the Springfield American Civil Liberties Union. Thank you, Teresa and Nancy, for the work that you have done to date. And I would like to thank the community for their tenacity in pushing this forward. Also, I would like to thank the City of Springfield Police Department and the Mayor's Office for following through with this and expeditiously following through with this. But we as in the ACLU know that speech is protected, but the way I feel today is that it stops when you put on the uniform, the badge, and the gun. And that's where it should stop. And that there's no place in our police department for this type of officer or this type of hate. And we will do whatever we can to continue to root this out. And we hopefully that the community would do that as well. And I think that it is important for the state's attorney to be here. And we have Greg Harris here, and we're very happy to see you, Mr. Harris, and the chief here, and whoever else is here. But we will continue to work with the NAACP and the Jewish Federation and all of our friends from every community that this officer identified. He left no leaf unturned, and which we know that this does happen is not an isolated event, and it's not an isolated person. We know he was not working in a silo by himself. So we're looking forward to these investigations and the transparency of these investigations to be given to the community, and so that we would have an opportunity to look at them as well. And Teresa, continue that. Nancy, continue that. And I do appreciate this opportunity. I wasn't expected to say anything, but you always put me on the spot. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Give him a hand. So the next person I'm going to put on the spot is Sunshine and Kareen. If you all want to come up for Black Lives Matter and say something, please. Let's give them a hand of encouragement. This is Springfield. There is unity in the community, and it's not just about the NAACP and the Jewish Federation. Other organizations had something to say, and they are a part of this community. We love them, we respect them, so regardless of what you hear, I'm here to tell you that's a misrumor. Thank you, ladies. Give them a hand.
Thank you all. I'm Sunshine Clemens, co-founder of Black Lives Matter. This is my partner, Karan Reedus. We're co-founders and co-presidents. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from those directly that are going to be involved in this investigation and what they plan to do to make sure that this was
what's left in the department is rooted out, if there's anything that remains. If any other officers have the same thought process, we're looking forward to hearing what the plan of action is to correct that and bring peace to the city after an event such as this. So we thank the community for coming out to listen to this. We appreciate the questions that we know are going to come, and we anticipate the transparency, and thank you in advance for that.
Next, I'm going to call up my favorite cousin, Mike Williams, 1 in a million. Mike, come on down. Keep it moving. Give him a hand. He's advertising. He got on his hoodie tonight.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. On behalf of 1 in a million, we're glad to be here. For us, it's been a fight for decades. We've been saying for decades that there's problems within that police department. And Dan Mans, we hope you and your people really take a look at this. Because if he sat down with some of us, we can go back decades. The cancer was never removed, it only spread it. I'm not standing here saying every policeman is a racist. But definitely, there's some serious, serious problems within our police department. And I hope that this incident is our George Floyd, in which the world says, no more, we're done. We want that gone. That's what we need. Thank you.
And is there a member from Faith Coalition here tonight? Come on up. Bring greetings. Is the Phoenix Center here tonight? Somebody from the Phoenix Center want to come and bring greetings before we get started and turn it over to our panelists? Come on, Vanessa.
Good evening. I'm Vanessa Knox, Chair of Transformational Justice with the Faith Coalition for the Common Good. We're glad to see everyone out tonight, and we hope you'll be inspired.
Thank you. Again, when you look around this room, this is what diversity looks like. We are one Springfield, one community, and there is definitely unity in our community. So we want to thank you in advance for coming out. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to our panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. If there's someone here from Kwame Raoul's office that wants to come join the head table, please feel free to do so. We want openness, we want transparency, we want to get down to the meat and potatoes of why we're here tonight. So I'm going to start with the police chief. How about that? Let's give him a hand. He's our new police chief. He's doing a wonderful job. So Ken, it's up to you.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Like Teresa said, my name is Ken Scarlett, and I have the privilege and the pleasure of serving as your chief of police here in Springfield. And you know, I do have some prepared remarks that I will say in just a few minutes. However, I think before that I offer those remarks, it's imperative that I say this. I and every member of my staff, every member of my agency is in agreement when I say with what we heard here tonight. We do not want hate in our department. We do not want racists in our department. We do not want anti-Jewish people in our department. There's no tolerance for any of that in the Springfield Police Department. So I'm in agreement with a lot of the stuff that I heard here, and I'm glad that I heard that, and I think it's important that you hear me say I support that. So let me just follow up with some opening remarks. Again, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ken Scarlett, and I've had the privilege of serving as the chief for about 2 months now. Yeah. Albeit I've served 24 years here with the Springfield Police Department, and my dedication to the agency has prepared me for the challenges that lie ahead. And I do know that I have the mayor's trust and support in this monumental task. So clearly it didn't take long for a major challenge to come the way of this agency. And as I've stated numerous times since April 1st, I am a firm believer in swift and decisive action, and wasted no time placing a now former officer on unpaid leave for his documented hate speech. This response to such a repulsive action delivered the message loud and clear to both our officers as well as the community that hate will not be tolerated in any form nor towards any group. Based on the response at the most recent city council meeting, the men and women of our agency also firmly believe these statements, and I know there are a few of them here tonight supporting this event as well. The SPD staff continues to meet with officers and attend squad meetings, which have led to many heartfelt conversations regarding this sickening event. The first step is to mend the relationships, and that would be the first step towards healing. This agency has worked diligently over the last several years to gain the trust of our community, and I saw that retired Police Chief Kenny Winslow is here, and I know that he was a big proponent of developing that trust, and that certainly will be our mission moving forward as well. You know, our community consists of different races, different religious beliefs, different sexual orientations, just to name a few. And each of these individuals, regardless of which category they may belong to, deserve to know that they have our full support. Since April 1st, my staff has reached out to various community stakeholders and trusted partners in an effort to work through this incredibly challenging time, and it's our true intention of being community partners, and that must be shared by all to all. The internal investigation of former Officer Nichols continues, even though he elected to resign, and although I cannot speak specifics of the case and what this investigation may include, I will certainly offer that we are committed to the review of all remaining body-worn camera videos. We're dissecting traffic stop data over his career. We are meticulously analyzing the department-issued computer for any derogatory information that has any derogatory information, and we have begun a joint review with the State's Attorney's Office of all of his police reports that were associated with any arrest. This agency has been and will continue to be progressive on the forefront of training and policy that denounces such radical behavior and comments. Our agency is committed to a similar swift response in the event this egregious act should ever be thought about again. And finally, this agency has already begun and will continue to work in partnership with you all and all the citizens of Springfield to regain and reaffirm the trust. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate it.
Give him a hand. Before this next gentleman introduces himself in the middle, I have the pleasure to introduce him as well. I am so excited. We have our first Black U.S. District Attorney, Mr. Greg Harris. Let's give him a hand. That's important because this is what diversity looks like. We also have our first Black Attorney General coming in the door. Let's give him a hand as he comes and joins us. Come on down, Kwame. Gentlemen, is there another chair to make room for Kwame?
Yes.
We'll pull up a chair.
We got a chair. Good. How you doing? Good seeing you again.
So, Mr. Harris?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It is my pleasure to serve as your United States Attorney for the Central District of Illinois. Like Ken, I've been in office for a whole 6 months now. And I am here to learn from you, from the community, on what the issues are. I don't have a prepared speech. I don't have prepared remarks. But I do want you to know that the Department of Justice is vitally interested in determining and prosecuting hate crimes. And I'll go into a little bit more of that a little bit later on as we get our panel discussions going. But I wanted to indicate our interest in being here tonight. We have, in addition to myself, we have two other Assistant United States Attorneys here. We have the manager of the Springfield Headquarters Office, Doug Quivy. Doug, if you're here, would you please stand? And we have an alumni of Southeast High School who's also an Assistant United States Attorney in our office, in the headquarters office, Sierra Senor Moore. Sierra, would you stand up, please? So at this point, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Harris. Oh, you don't have, no, I'll be happy to do that.
Let me say something about Dan before he starts. This is what diversity looks like. Dan is a life member of the NAACP, so give him a hand for that. When Dan came to Springfield, he says, what is it that I need to do to get involved? I believe in the organization and your mission and what you're trying to do, and I am here and I have an open door policy. Every year, if there's an opening for summer jobs, our state's attorney reaches out to the NAACP to make sure that there are people who look like you and I in this room working at the state's attorney's office. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. My name's Dan Wright. I'm the Sangamon County State's Attorney. The only thing that Greg Harris and I disagree on, in my experience, is the fact that his office stole Sierra Seymour Moore from our office. But she's just a fantastic attorney and an even better person. So we wish her the best in her continued career. I've been state's attorney since late 2018 and joined the office in April of 2016. And it has been the honor of my professional life to serve every day the people of Sangamon County and have an opportunity to make a difference every day and to do the right thing in my best judgment, and not only in my judgment, but part of that is community outreach. It's listening and talking with people, even if we may disagree. I think that kind of transparency and engagement is important, and this is part of that, and I pledge to do that continually into the future as long as I'm state's attorney. Let me just first on a personal note, and we're going to talk about a lot of things from a professional perspective tonight in our respective roles. But I just want to say, as a citizen of Springfield, as a human being, as a father of 4 children, when I read the post that this former officer made, my first reaction was my heart sunk, my stomach turned, and then just a feeling of unadulterated anger came over me. I thought of people he described in those posts that are my friends, that are my neighbors, that are my coworkers. And to read those things about those individuals and many people in those categories that I don't even know and may meet in the future, to read such hate for someone because of what they look like, because of what they may believe, or because of who they love, is just categorically reprehensible, despicable, and something that I think we should, in every aspect of our society, do everything that we can, whether as officials or as citizens, to root that out in every corner of our society. I'm saying that as both as a father and as state's attorney. I want my kids to be raised in a community where we are all united to eliminate those kinds of terrible beliefs and any action that people may take based on those beliefs. So that, just on a personal level, that was my reaction. And I won't include it in the introduction, but I anticipate a lot of questions about how my office has responded so far and the work that we intend to do in the future. But I will say, just preliminarily, as soon as I found out about these posts, which was probably I think late Friday night or early Saturday morning, evening of April 1st, when this news came out, the morning of April 2nd, I reached out to Teresa Haley and to Nancy Sage and said, we need to bring the community together as best we can. That's not a solution to have an event like this, but it's a step toward transparency and communication and identifying solutions that we can all be a part of to move our community forward and identify anybody else in a position of authority that may espouse these beliefs, but also to determine whether the beliefs of this person crept into his official behavior. And that's part of the process that I know that I firmly believe that the Springfield Police Department is committed to doing that. And I'm a committed partner, and I know that everyone on this panel is supportive and will be there to provide assistance to that end. So the first thing, on a professional level, the first thing that I did was Monday morning we started an internal review of any cases that I or my colleagues knew of immediately that this officer was involved in, and that wasn't many, but we started to look into those. And then reached out to the Springfield Police Department and asked for various records that would reflect actions taken in this former officer's official capacity. They are working very cooperatively to provide us all the records that we've requested. And we'll discuss this later as well, but part of what I think it's important for the public to understand is that the various agencies represented on this panel have different authority, different scopes of their jurisdiction and their power under federal and state law. It's important that we all fulfill those duties to the maximum extent possible. But it's also, I think, important for the public to understand what the scope of that authority is. The authority of the U.S. Attorney's Office, for example, to be involved with the investigation of civil rights, or the authority of the Attorney General's Office to investigate patterns and practices. That is divergent from the authority of the state's Attorney's Office. And my top priority right now is to ensure, based upon any available evidence, because I have to operate based on evidence, not based on speculation or conjecture, but whether there's any available evidence that this officer committed any unlawful conduct in his official capacity, based upon records that are available to us and that we will review. And also that these beliefs didn't translate into actions that then later resulted in charges filed by my office or citations issued by this officer. And so we are going to conduct a thorough, responsible, systematic, and transparent review of those cases. And as Ken Page said, there's not going to be any attempt to be anything less than absolutely transparent throughout that process, particularly when that is complete. But it's important that we all understand that's not a fast or easy process, but it's important, and nothing in life that's worth doing is fast or easy. And in this situation, even more so than others, a careful, thorough review is important. But you don't have to take my word for it. I'm not going to grade my own test. You'll certainly all have access to the records that we reviewed pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act and any decisions made by our office. But as we review those cases, we're doing it with an eye toward, if there's a case that we have to rely solely on this officer's credibility, we will look toward dismissing those cases or taking appropriate action. But if it's a case where it can be independently sustained by other evidence, then in the interest of public safety and enforcement of the law, there are those cases that should be pursued. But we will not be calling this officer and vouching for his testimony in any capacity, obviously. But happy to take any questions, and I, again, want to thank you all for being here.
Let's give Dan a hand. So it looks like we saved the best for last. Kwame Raoul, go ahead and introduce yourself and make some comments, please.
Well, first off, I want to thank you, Teresa, for inviting us all here and for reaching out to me. I probably was the last of the panelists here to actually learn about the communications that were put online. I was actually out of state that weekend where this was all revealed, and ironically, I was out of state at a Leadership Institute meeting that brought together public officials of diverging views from different states, different parties, to close ourselves up for several days from the outside world and have honest conversation about the things that may impact our leadership as public officials and the prejudices out there that come into play. And so it's with coming from having that honest dialogue, which doesn't happen often, where you can actually say, hey, Arthur, I was in Aspen. What happens in Aspen stays in Aspen. Let's have an honest conversation. Then learning of this former officer who made the comments and having come to my office, because it was the end of legislative session, so I did come directly to Springfield, and actually sitting down and reading the vile anti-Semitic and racist comments that were made. We often talk about hate crime. I think it's important for people to know sort of the meaning of hate crime as opposed to just hate or hateful expression. The animus of hate must be accompanied by some other act, whether it's an assault, a threat, stalking, or something of that nature. I know we can read some pretty nasty and vile comments, and we can conclude to ourselves, oh, that person should be locked up based on what they said. That's not how the law reads, and I just want to be totally transparent about that. On the heels of George Floyd's murder, I called two former colleagues of mine, and I'm just out of full disclosure, I'm a Democrat. I called. You may have guessed, I don't know. But I called two former Republican colleagues of mine. One was former Senator Tim Bivens, who was, in addition to being a retired state senator, he was a retired county sheriff. And I called Senator John Milner, who, in addition to being a retired state senator, was a retired police chief. And I said, you know, the three of us had previously, when we were in the legislature, discussed the notion that our decertification statute for law enforcement officers was inadequate. And in fact, it was Tim Bivens who, as a former sheriff, had led the charge, even advocating for licensing. And I said, you know, perhaps this is an opportunity for us to revisit the conversation that we didn't complete our acts as sitting state senators and convene law enforcement leaders from throughout the state. And so I said, Tim, you reach out to the sheriffs, John, you reach out to the chiefs, I'll reach out to the state's attorneys. Let's all get together and let's confront the fact that our state statute with regards to this is inadequate, in that it only allowed for decertification upon conviction of a felony or in certain misdemeanors. And we did that, and we gathered for over 25 meetings, and we passed we went to the legislature with a package that was a lot more robust than the existing law. To the credit of Chief Scarlett and State's Attorney Wright, as a result of the law that we enhanced, they reached out to the Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board to suggest that this officer should be a candidate for decertification. It's one thing for an officer to have resigned from their post at that specific police department. The reality is we have over, I think, 700 police departments throughout the state, so you can resign from one police department and potentially go and be employed at another one unless you have been decertified as an official. And so that, I commend the chief and State's Attorney Wright for taking that step and acting swiftly. I also commend them on the commencement of an investigation. The four of us did gather last week, along with Teresa, to discuss what was going on, what the action has been since, and the role that my office plays in certain circumstances where there's clear systemic problems within a law enforcement department, as opposed to something that's focused on one individual. And so, you know, I'm certainly here to make sure that I explain that, because folks can jump to certain conclusions that, you know, if we have the authority to do something, why aren't you jumping in and doing that? And I want to be totally transparent about that. Similarly, the Department of Justice has historically played the role of initiating sort of those types of civil rights or patterns and practices, investigations, so forth. Our authority is more recently given on that front. We have been in contact with one another, not only last week, but what I appreciate is the proactive nature of Chief Scarlett and State's Attorney Wright in saying, hey, well, yes, this is one individual, but how can we take steps to have early warnings? What, we feel like we're doing everything right, but maybe there's some best practices that we may not be aware of that we can embrace. And let's face it, throughout this country, that often is how things happen. There's one incident, whether in Chicago it was Laquan McDonald, or in Minnesota it was George Floyd, but you don't always see the proactive nature of law enforcement leaders that I think we've seen thus far in this instance. And so, I applaud that. Our office, I think we provided, and I brought flyers on hate crime so people can understand the distinction between hate speech and hate crime. I think it's important for people to understand the distinction before they call on any of these people or anybody else to go out arrest somebody because of what they may have said or expressed on a social media platform. That said, our office has also been active. Unfortunately, we live in a world now where there are social media platforms that feed hate, that allow hate to grow, and that tolerate hate on their platforms. And as Attorney General, as Attorneys General collectively, we've challenged some of those social media platforms. But the reality is, again, out of transparency, not all social media platforms will listen to the notion that we're challenging them. And I think that the social media platform in this case is probably one of those that probably won't listen much.
Let's give him a hand. So before we get started with our question, our mayor is here. Mayor Langfelder, will you come up and bring greetings? Let's give him a hand.
Well, good evening. It's good to see everybody. It's tragic about the incident. But unfortunately, we try to do all we can to eradicate hate in our community. I think other communities, of course, do this, but I really have to applaud Teresa Haley, and what she continues to do is take immediate action to bring everybody together, because it is important, because regardless of how well we think we are doing, it's never enough. And so, I can go on and on about the disdain of what's happened, what's transpired, but really reflecting on what Attorney General Kwame Raoul had said with the swift action of Chief Scarlett, it really shows that it was not accepted in the police department. Again, on Tuesday, we had a great representation by the men and women in blue, which we appreciate because it showed that it's not accepted within the ranks. And I think, if you looked at the posts and I was offended, I appreciate the hate crime literature you passed out, because it's good to reflect back. Some of that is new information. But you look at what's transpired, I think that checked all the boxes, with regards to religion, persecution, ethnicity, gender, and, sexuality. And the individual we're discussing really checked all those boxes. But what's important is, what should we do from here? How do you go on and take a look at what's transpired? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? We do all we can, and I said at the council, I'll reflect on it again today, this action, or what the police department stands for, what the city of Springfield, each and every department stands for, hopefully each and every citizen in the city of Springfield stands for, is continuous action of intolerance towards bias activity. And it's not a light switch you turn on in these incidents. It's what we should live each and every day. And that's what's important. That's what makes us stronger and improves upon our community and our ability to live as one, is really continuing that action each and every day, really believing in it and living in it. And that's what, I've stated previously, back several years ago when we had the incident in Carolina. We had the anti-hate proclamation, and it's not any different as it was then as it is today. And so that's what I really appreciate everybody coming out. I look forward to hearing comments, because it's really listening to one another and understanding how we were harmed by this in different facets, but most importantly, how do we move on from this together to, again, make sure we do not have any tolerance for this type of speech in our community. So thank you for coming out and being part of it.
All righty, we have less than an hour left, so go ahead and start lining up to ask your questions. There are microphones around the room. So if you have a question, it looks like Sunshine is up first, so go right ahead and ask the panel your question.
Thank you again. I'm Sunshine Clemens, Black Lives Matter. I would like to hear, what is the plan to make sure that there are no officers left on the force that feel that way? And I appreciate what you say, that all the officers stand with you, they don't agree, but you also would have said that 2 weeks ago when that officer was on the force, because it's been said to me many times in the meetings over the years. So just would like to know, what is the plan? What are the steps that are being taken to try to verify that there are no officers who still feel that way or agreed with that officer, feel that he had the right to say those things along those lines. And while I'm here, I'm going to ask a twofold question. Are there any steps that are in place or any follow-up with that officer? Based on his statements, he was a sociopath and ready to blow. Now that he's been uncovered, lost his job, is there anything that's being done to ensure that he's not potentially a threat to the people that he very genuinely, all these groups that he hated? So that's kind of a twofold question.
Well, let me start with the first part of that question. And let me be very honest. This man served 18 years on our department, and all the officers that I've talked to, and trust me, I've talked across all divisions, all different watches, no one was aware that this gentleman had these tendencies. And I know people may find that hard to believe. That goes as far as every ethnicity of our officers said that. So let me just start with that. So to guarantee that, I guess that we're going to rid out everyone, I will rid out everyone that I know about that has done something this egregious. You can mark my word on that. I want absolutely no part of this on my police department. I think that's important. What am I going to do to guarantee that it doesn't happen again? I think we have to have continual training. We have to have tough dialogue. We have to have tough conversations. We implemented a diversity advisory committee that we put together to formulate these meetings amongst our officers, to have the tough conversations and be able to talk about this. I will say this, and I know that I have representatives of our agency here. I know there's representatives of our union here. If there are people that I'm not aware of on our agency that express similar beliefs, I want to know names. I want to know what they said, and they'll be dealt with appropriately. I don't have any use for that hate speech in our department, in this city. That's just totally unacceptable.
No retaliation against those officers that come forward.
Of course not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We don't want that fear and that retaliation. I'm sorry. He's got my back.
Good evening. My name is Mike Lopez of the Village of Jerome. I know many of you. Welcome Mayor Langfelder and the group on the panel. I'm very concerned because my heart bleeds. Look at my skin. I don't go to a sun tannery, but I'm a little dark. And I'm head of government. Latino, Hispanic. As a child at Erickson School in Moline, I was called a speck and a wetback in the 1960s. We were told to sit at a separate food bar at W.T. Grant's store in downtown Moline. But my concern is we have to come back as a community. And I'm going to call out the elected officials. Springfield has a mass of elected officials, appointed, elected. How many are here tonight? How many are here tonight?
My alderman's here.
I know, Sean's here. Give him a hand. But my concern is to the Chief, the Honorable Dan Wright, Attorney Harris, Attorney General, how are we going to stop this? I've talked to people today and they said, it's just a community discussion, it's going to happen again. I hope in my next 25 years of life, if I live that expectancy, we can reduce it. I challenge and I ask Mayor Langfelder to consider when he makes that task force to include the area mayors of Springfield and Sangamon County if Brian McFadden could do that. We're separate by zip code and taxation, but we're one people. We're one people. Thank you very much. I stopped preaching. I'll let Ken take the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lopez. I appreciate that. General, I'm glad to see you. I had an introduction at the beginning, ACLU president at Springfield, and I don't want anyone to say that ACLU is advocating what I'm about to say, but I am about to say this: is that I know we're going to look at do a forensic investigation of the equipment that he used that belonged to the city. But oftentimes, these guys are smart enough, or maybe not so smart enough, they use their own equipment, their own electronics, and everything like that. So I don't know whether or not, I know hate speech is protected, and I know that whole issue with speech and how far that will go. Will it go beyond just the equipment for the city? Has that been thought out, with the state's attorney? Are we looking at his equipment, personal electronic equipment as well? His personal computers and things like that? And this is as a citizen. I'm just asking that question. Are we going beyond just what he may not have used for that belonged to the city? And his connections may be with his own personal electronic equipment.
Well, I'll speak on behalf of what the investigation the Springfield Police Department is conducting. We're doing an internal investigation into any of his activity while he was associated with our agency, and that's where it comes into we're checking his department-issued computer and anything that may have happened while he was associated as a Springfield police officer. And I would defer to the state's attorney from a criminal perspective as far as any personal related items that they may look into.
Well, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to take that question. Again, just making sure the public understands what the role of an investigative agency is versus a prosecuting agency like the state's attorney's office. The state's attorney's office doesn't initiate and conduct investigations. That's for a law enforcement agency, and we work with 26 in this county. And sometimes that's the Springfield Police Department, sometimes it's the Illinois State Police. But when investigations are completed and presented to us, we review them for potential criminal conduct that can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But as part of that role, we do often advise agencies conducting those investigations if they have questions about, for example, the appropriateness of a particular action to gain information, whether that requires a search warrant, which would have to be supported by probable cause. We help law enforcement agencies conform to the Constitution and the laws of the state of Illinois as they conduct the investigations. And then when they are complete, we review them to determine whether the filing of any charges is appropriate. And that's what I anticipate that we will do in this case when the internal investigation is complete at the Springfield Police Department. And while there's an internal investigation that the police department is conducting, when I speak of a review that my office is conducting, that really is limited to the records that are presented to our office and actions that we may have taken based upon the official actions of this officer, whether that be a direct filed traffic citation that remains pending. We want to look at all of those to determine whether those citations can be independently sustained without this officer's testimony, because we will not be relying upon his testimony in any way moving forward. We will also be reviewing reports that resulted in arrests, and if any charges were filed as a result of those arrests that remain pending, we will review those to determine whether there's any evidence of misconduct on the face of those records, but also to determine whether we can sustain those cases moving forward and prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt without his testimony, because it will not be relied upon, as we would only advance the testimony of the law enforcement officer that we believe to be credible, and we certainly don't believe that in this case. So that's what we're focused on right now. And what I neglected to mention before is that one of the first things we did, and I think the public should know this right away, is that one of the first things that we did was communicate with the Sangamon County Jail to ensure that there is nobody in custody right now that had been arrested by this officer and had their liberty deprived, and making sure that that was the first thing that we reviewed. And it was confirmed by the Sangamon County Jail Administration that there are no such individuals in custody. So I think that's important for the public to know.
Well, there's probably no to that answer about going to his personal equipment. But on that decertification, if we're successful with that in Illinois, will he be able to go to Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, you know, and become a, and it's probably, that answer is probably yes at this point?
Well, I would hope that any agency that thought about hiring this individual would conduct a thorough background check the way that we do when we hire individuals, and that would certainly come out as part of a background investigation. And I don't know about the decertification from one state to the next.
Yeah. No, I mean, we can only control the law within the state of Illinois. That said, we do create a part of what we've done is create a database, right? And so we, you know, like I said, I can't control what a police department in Indiana may do, or in Missouri, or any of the 50 states. But I can tell you, before I hire a lawyer, if I'm hiring a lawyer that practice in another state, I'm going to ask questions about what happened in that other state. You know, and I'm going to do that investigation. I'm just telling you what I would do as a chief of an agency, but I can't guarantee that that's the case for any police department throughout the country.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. The question maybe for the Attorney General, because I'm glad you raised the issue of decertification and the newness of the authority of the training board to decertify an officer in this situation. I just was hoping you could give us some additional clarity and additional information on what local officials and the community can do to be involved in that process, make sure it goes through, is thorough and accurate. And just to clarify, I want to make sure that I understand this is a discretionary action that the board can take. It's not automatic.
Correct.
They have to go through due process.
Correct.
So series of questions. Is your office involved in that? Are local offices involved in that? You mentioned that this is a new process. Is it fair to say that as many as just 2 years ago, this officer could not have been decertified under state law?
That's fair to say, yes.
And that the ability to do so is a result of recent reforms that were, is this part of the Safety Act package?
It's the part of the Safety Act that the Attorney General championed, by the way.
And so what are the contours of that? What's the timeline? What should we be looking for? And what can the community do?
So there was the delay on Safety Act, some of the Safety Act implementation. So I believe, and I don't have everything in front of me, I was focused on new legislation up to last week. But I believe July 1st is when the door begins to open for ILETSB. And when I say ILETSB, I apologize, the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, to begin to be processing these referrals for decertification. As I mentioned earlier, the prior standard was it was just a question of automatic decertification based on conviction of felonies and certain misdemeanors, many of them sort of sex-related misdemeanors. We expanded the misdemeanor offenses that could lead to decertification, and then we just put in conduct that I forget the exact language of the statute, but there's sort of a catch-all that would cover conduct unbecoming of an officer, and certainly, as we can see by the swift action taken by the Springfield Police Department, that this was deemed conduct unbecoming of a police officer. I appreciate in terms of your question, what can the public do to be supportive of that? Certainly there can be communication to the ILETSB board. I do sit on in terms of the Attorney General's office's participation, I do sit on statutorily as a member of the ILETSB board, so we're not involved in sort of prosecuting the decertification case or anything like that, because there'd be a clear conflict there because I sit on the board. Suffice to say, my prediction of potential outcome, I think, not all cases would be, as far as discretionary decertification, would be as clear-cut as what I believe this one would be, but that's based on what I've seen, based on the own officers, the officer himself deciding to resign under the circumstances. I think there's some strong evidence. I can't say for certain, and it would be inappropriate for me to say for certain that this officer will be decertified. So I wouldn't answer that question, but I think there's some strong evidence thus far.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I got a couple of comments and then a couple of questions for our Chief Ken and our State's Attorney Dan. Good to see you, buddy.
See you.
18 years. 18 years, and nobody knew anything. But 5 years ago, right over there in the auditorium, I told them, we don't need those kind of officers in our neighborhoods. Did anybody do any research after that? And that was just 5 years ago. Me personally, and I'm sure there's some other people feel like I do, he's not the only one. So, Chief, I understand you don't know what to do, and if you could find them, you would do this and do that. But kind of like the city, until you start hitting them in the pocket, you ain't gonna get nobody's attention. So I'm gonna give you some suggestions. And since some of our lawmakers are not here, which is sad, we gotta hit them in the pocket, because this guy retired with his pension, and now we gotta pay. Here in Springfield, our citizens pay for the fire and the police. So if the lawmakers would create a law that states something like, if you're found doing any of this hate crime and hate stuff, you automatically lose your pension. I think that'll get the attention of some people, and they'll stop doing what they're doing. Because there's some officers out there, there's some officers out there on social media under different names. I know it. Been told it. Can't prove it, because I don't be on social media like that. But until we start taking actions at that White House, we're going to continue to have this same problem because I stood up here 5 years ago talking about those officers. Now, I scanned this whole room when I came in here, and there's some officers in plain clothes, and there's some officers in uniforms. And not all of them are bad, and I don't want anybody to leave here to think that we hate our officers. We don't. We know that there's some good ones and there's some bad ones. But the good ones got to start speaking up for the bad ones that are in our department. Because if you don't speak up, then you're just as bad. And so I'm asking everybody in this room and throughout our city to be vigilant on everywhere you go, because throughout the country there's a lot of hatred and we need a lot of prayer. But I'm not trusting a lot of people right now. And this officer in left, and he got a following of whatever supremacy group, and like somebody asked the very first question, how are you going to protect the people in this room and in our community? Because they only got to get it one time right. You got to get it right all the time. And I know that's hard to do, Chief. And you know I stood with you. I told you how I feel. We ain't had our conversations. But don't be naive that it's just one. It's not. I don't want to be back here in 5 years or even in next year talking about the same old thing. So, panel, get on your lawmakers. Tell them we need new laws to help eliminate these bad ones so we can move together as a community. Dan.
Yes, sir.
It's about less than a year ago, a white male, not from our community, pulled a gun on Chatham Road on one of our state legislators. We ain't heard nothing about that. And I'm sure everybody in this room want to know and hear the outcome of what happens to that individual. Because if that was me, I'd be in cuffs. You would have took my gun, and you probably would have put me in jail by now. Yeah, I'd be in jail. So black males gonna have a problem with white males pulling guns, and then they get to go home that same day. That's gonna be a problem, Dan, and we can't have that. He's a lawmaker, and there's a law with road rage that is a felony now. And I don't know how many months it's been, but I'm sure you know the story. We need to hear what's going on for us to start feeling comfortable about your office doing the right thing. That's all I have.
I just want to address, thank you very much. James, I appreciate every word that you said, and I think it's important for me to respond to your questions to let you and everybody else know the status of that case. That individual was charged just as anybody else in this community who committed that kind of an act would be charged. That case remains pending, and it's currently set for trial in June. And we have made repeated efforts to get a firm trial date. Unfortunately, the state's attorney's office is not the only player in the system, and defense attorneys have the right to request a continuance. We have the right to request a firm trial date, and that's one of the biggest challenges in my office, in that we have, under Illinois law, an act called the Speedy Trial Act. Many of you in this room know about that, which says that we have to bring cases to trial within 120 days. But that's a little misleading in that that's only 120 days if I'm asking for that time to prepare for trial. We rarely do that unless there is a witness issue, something that we need to do to make sure the integrity of this prosecution is maintained, that we're in the best position to get justice for the victims in the community. But that's a rare occurrence. And this is perhaps a separate discussion, but I think it's relevant to your question. Most of the cases that have been around for too long are because of requests for extra time by the defense. They have a constitutional right to prepare a defense, and judges have the responsibility to grant or deny those continuances. So that has been one of the concerns with this case, in that we have requested disposition of the case by trial, and they've asked for more time. We now have what I believe should be a firm trial date. Certainly, if I have anything to say about it, we've asked for a firm trial date, and we'll be prepared for trial in June. And we have not done anything to delay that case. The offenses charged were appropriate and would be charged regardless of what that individual looks like, who the victim in that case may happen to be. We intend to proceed with that case. And about that or any other case, those are public matters that everybody in this room has a right to know exactly what the status is, and not just looking at the clerk's website. But if anybody has a question about the status of a case in my office, you can call me and I'll return your call. We may not always agree, but if I'm permitted ethically, there are rules about speaking to individuals who have counsel or their families, and I take those very seriously too. But there is an open door, an open phone line if you have questions about cases like that. And I'm glad you asked that question, James.
And I just had a follow-up for you as well, James. And you and I have a relationship to where we talk and text and whatnot. And you sounded like you may have specific information that we need to talk about as far as if you believe someone else is making similar statements. I have my lieutenant from Internal Affairs here. You can certainly talk to me, and that's exactly what I want to relay. If there are specific information that people in this room, any of my officers, the good officers, want to bring forward, that has to be done. That's how we, to everyone's point, root out those who quite possibly still remain and need to be removed from law enforcement as a whole. That's how we decertify them from moving on to their next law enforcement spot. So it takes everyone working together for the betterment of this community.
My name is Douglas Holt, and I want to start off by saying, but all of my questions were answered by the panel to the point that I had to pull up my paper and put it in my pocket. Okay? So, but I want to focus on one main issue that's disturbing me more than anything. My initial background is investigative journalism. I used to work up in Chicago, covering stories as a freelancer mostly. And what I'm dealing at is dealing with mostly considered records. In other words, our entire life and wherever we go is recorded. Be it where we're in employment, police record, medical, wherever we go, it's recorded. If it's not accurate, then we have a problem. If that police report isn't accurate and I come in and contest it, and they're telling me back that it is accurate, but then my question, what I want to put into place is, what methods do you have in place to ensure that accuracy of your investigation, starting with the police report that may have been against somebody, as well as the investigation that you're going to be doing on this officer?
I'll take it. Well, so what methods are in place to ensure the accuracy of what he wrote? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, at any point in time, it could have been, someone could have just, because of their misjudgment, prejudgment, or whatever.
Sure. Well, I think the first and foremost that I think of is the body-worn cameras. We instituted those 6 years ago, and one thing that they do is they paint the picture that goes along with the written report, right? I mean, that's the story right there, and that's the beauty of the body-worn cameras, is that they capture not only someone's statement, but also state of mind, condition, and all those things that go into what you can't see by writing a report. So I think that's probably the best tool that we have to ensure accuracy when it comes to report writing.
Okay. How and what methods, as a follow-up question, can a private citizen contest that accuracy?
Well, that would be your opportunity in court, as far as if you were, I guess, a suspect in the criminal case, then your ability to contest that would be in court. Or if an officer of an agency did something that you thought was inappropriate, there's the internal affairs route as well. So those are the two avenues as far as contesting that I can think of. I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I think that's well said. But just again, in respect to my office's involvement, we obviously have, and mention this again, and this just applies to everything that anybody in my office does, particularly assistant state's attorneys who take the same oath that I did to uphold the Constitution and enforce the laws of the state of Illinois without bias or prejudice. And that applies to this as well. We've got an obligation not to rely upon information from law enforcement that we know to be false. We don't do that. But part of being able to abide by that obligation and part of that oath is having evidence that information is not accurate. And that's part of the process of evaluating cases, but also if a case is charged based upon information that was contained in an investigation, and we, at some point during the prosecution of that case, develop a good faith belief that that charge cannot be sustained, then it's our obligation to dismiss the case. I don't have the words verbatim that are from I think it's Rule 3.8 in the Rules of Professional Conduct that are specific to prosecutors. And they're drawn from an old federal case that articulated what the role of a prosecutor is. And it's not simply to obtain convictions, but to seek justice. And part of that is having an eye for inaccuracies based upon evidence presented to us that establishes that information provided to us by law enforcement may not be accurate. That's part of what our jobs are. It's part of what defense attorneys' jobs are. But as you know, these are not my words, but as ministers of justice that take an oath, not just to obtain convictions, but to seek justice, that's something that we always have to be open to. And again, if you know the old saying about, you know, if you see yourself as just a hammer, all you see are nails, and that's not what I or any prosecutor in my office you know, seeks to emulate in the work that we do. So it's not an easy process, but again, we operate based upon evidence. So if there's evidence of misconduct or an inaccuracy in a report, we have to be open to that based upon going where the evidence would lead us.
Before the next person comes up, I have a question for U.S. Attorney Greg Harris. So he's quiet up here. How can the NAACP, the Jewish Federation, and other concerned organizations get the Department of Justice to be involved in this investigation?
Well, Teresa, thank you for the question, and also thank you for getting us together. I also like to thank the Jewish Foundation, Nancy Sage, for also getting us together. This discussion is very important. It's very much needed. I'm learning a lot about the sentiments of the community. It's something that we in the Department of Justice have been working on under the current administration, is to repair the relationships between the community and law enforcement generally, and with regard to the justice system as well. There's a lot of skepticism out there. We all know it, and we're trying to address that skepticism and become more of a partner to the community. We've done a number of things to do that, specifically as far as the Department of Justice is concerned. No-knock warrants. No-knock warrants have been a subject of concern in the community for years, and then most recently in some unfortunate incidents. The Department of Justice has now imposed a restriction on the use of no-knock warrants for law enforcement officers. And only when it threatens the life of the officer or the individual is a no-knock warrant going to be sought by our office. And that's just one circumstance or one example of how we're looking at events that have led to unfortunate events, tragedies, and that we're hopeful that they will improve our relationship with the community. We're also involved in community outreach programs, working with the NAACP and specific, the Urban League, the Faith Coalition, other community organizations, and trying to teach or train folks of the faith community, synagogues and other places like that, of what to do when there might be a situation involving a shooter coming to the synagogue or the church grounds. We've had two such programs now, one in Champaign and one in Urbana, that we provided. COVID, of course, has kind of eliminated our ability to do that in the last couple of years, but we hope to return to that as well. You know, another major area, I think, that leads to friction between the law enforcement and the community is gun violence. And that's the highest priority of our administration, is to tackle gun violence. So we're doing everything that we can to utilize criminal process in terms of bringing people that shouldn't possess guns to justice, people who have obtained firearms unlawfully, and not only just individuals, but also dealers of firearms. We have another rising problem with gun violence, and that is the acquisition of what's called ghost guns by individuals, guns that don't have serial numbers, guns that are manufactured and put together. These are being used more and more in crimes of violence that we are prosecuting or investigating. But it is a high priority of ours, and we recognize the necessity of working with the community and trying to regain that trust with the community, with law enforcement. And I think we're going to do that as long as we continue to understand that we're not going to be able to lock our way out of this. We're not going to be able to prosecute our way out of this. We're going to need to do everything we can to cooperatively work with the community and deal with the problems that we have. So I guess in sum, we're going to prosecute those individuals that commit crimes of violence, in particular hate crime violence, but we're also going to try and work with the community organizations to provide leadership and training and federal funding and resources to deal with the problems of our crime in the communities. Let me just say one other thing. In particular, this is a personal interest of mine, and I think I've been in law enforcement. I've been in the U.S. Attorney's Office now for about 30 years, and I noticed that the numbers of the identity of the individuals that have been involved in our recent crimes, gun crimes in particular, the ages are getting younger and younger and younger. And this is something that we have to address. Usually in the federal system, we don't prosecute juveniles. We usually, I mean, there is a process to do that, but typically we don't do that. But we have to figure out some type of diversionary programs, some type of help programs for these younger kids that are picking up guns or aiding those that are using guns and gun violence. And I want you to know, I want the community to know, the public to know, that we recognize this is an issue, and we're going to focus our attention and cooperation and partnership with the local law enforcement agencies, the state's attorney's office, the chiefs of police, the sheriffs, the attorney general's office. We are collectively going to try and deal with this lowering of age of people that are involved in gun violence. And so I hope I've answered your question, Teresa.
Some of it, but that's okay. We'll come back to you. So I want to get through the people who are in line. We only have a few more minutes left. So thank you so much. Yes, sir.
My name is Pat Chesley, and I want to thank all the law enforcement agencies for coming out. I think it's great, and all the people that have come out, because racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia is a disease in all governmental agencies. My concern is what concrete steps can be taken to try and root this out. Do you have educational programs that you teach people with? And if so, have they failed, and should they, be revised to look into this? Is there testing that can be used to try and root this problem out? My concern is I've been around a long time, And I've seen incidents happen, and everybody coalesces, comes together, says the right things, and I don't want to degrade in any way the fact of coming together, showing solidarity and support, but it doesn't solve the problem. And I'm looking for more steps that solve the problem, like James said, encouraging officers to report things. So, and are there other things that can be done to try and root out this problem in a concrete way?
So let me take a crack at that, because let me first start by saying every profession is an evolving profession, and so historically there have been tools that have been used in training and so forth, and every such tool in every profession is inadequate because of that evolution, right? That said, right now, we're engaged with the Chicago Police Department in the implementation of a consent decree, first of its kind in Chicago, that allows us, and it's adversarial from the standpoint of the caption and on the court case, and it's been adversarial. It's in some ways along the way as well, but in other ways it's an opportunity, right? And it brings experts in from around the country who have learned to do things in better ways. And what that has lent to us as an agency are tools as well as people, experts that might lend themselves to police departments throughout our state, whether or not they're engaged in the consent decree or whether or not we're engaged in investigating them.
Can you share that expertise with our police department here?
Well, I was getting there. Getting there. Chief Scarlett actually reached out to my office to find out about some of that. I can't articulate to you right now the specifics of early warning signals. My civil rights team knows that a lot better than I do, but they have been engaged with Chief Scarlett about potentially accessing some of those tools and some of those experts that have done things progressively in other states and other jurisdictions that have worked. Now, let me be clear about saying that there's no tool that is going to be foolproof to sift through every individual, and I'd be lying to you if I told you that, oh, I got the magic tool that can make sure you don't have a racist officer on a police force. I don't think anybody has that tool, or if they do, I wouldn't trust it if they represented it as that. But there are processes, and there are people who know those processes better than I do, and we have been in discussion with regards to the Springfield Police Department proactively engaging such experts.
If I could just piggyback what the Attorney General said, and I have been in contact with Chris Wells through the Attorney General's office on this early warning system, and that was something that was mentioned to me, and I certainly have no problems reaching out for advice, for ideas. I don't have all the answers. I'll be the first to admit that. There are other people out there much more studious, if you will, than I am, and I do not have a problem leaning on them for understanding and advice to move this agency forward. That's what I'm committed to. I'm not going to sit here and say, that we're going to do things the way we've always done things, or that I'm going to dig my heels in. I'm committed to proactively looking for the help that's out there to help our agency, heal with the community, establish the trust that I know has been fractured, that we've worked so hard to get, and that's what we're committed to moving forward. And you all have my word that that's what our agency will do. And if it's through the Attorney General's office, if it's through the U.S. Attorney, the state's attorney, that's who we'll reach out to for advice and understanding, training. We've been speaking with U.S. Attorney Mr. Harris on grant opportunities for hate crimes. I mean, I will leave no stone unturned to try and root out the problems that are out there.
It's my understanding that, sorry, it's my understanding that this incident was brought to the attention of the police department, not by the police, by an outside source. And so can you give us any insight into how the police department failed for so long to see this?
Well, I guess my first question would be, the man served in the U.S. military for 20 years, so they didn't see it either. And that's not to make an excuse. That's certainly to say that there's the potential that people have feelings that they keep deep-rooted in their chest that don't come out. Now, again, are there early warning systems that we can employ moving forward? Potentially. I don't know what it consists of, but yes, I'm certainly willing to entertain those. Yeah.
Chief, I think you're great. I think you're doing a wonderful job. I'm not saying you're the problem here at all. It just happened.
Well, I don't ever want it to happen again. That's what I'll tell you, and I'm committed to making sure that it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Phillips. I pastor First Presbyterian Church. I'm on the leadership team for the Springfield Coalition on Dismantling Racism, and I'm on the board for the Interfaith Association. And tonight, I'm only speaking for myself.
Hi, Susan.
Just to clarify all that. Hi. Some of you are neighbors. It's good to see you. There's some things that are really important for why the four of you are here, and that's because the person at the center of this particular incident was a law enforcement officer. So the legal and justice issues are pertinent. However, every person of color in this room knows that racism is not limited to law enforcement. Yes? Every person in this room who is of a belief or religious tradition that isn't Christian knows that they experience discrimination on a regular basis. Is that true? So what I would say to you is there are a whole bunch of this in this room that are willing to work alongside you because you can't fix this. White folks need to be responsible for dismantling the racism that we benefit from. And when I'm the one who says something that I shouldn't, when I misspeak, when I forget myself, when I don't realize the thing that I'm saying is hurtful, please call me on it, because I want to learn to do better. I also want you to know, though, that for the folks in the room who are Jewish or Muslim, I know that for years you have hired security to stand outside the synagogues and mosques because you are not safe, primarily from Christian extremists. So now I want to talk to all the Christians in the room. Now, I admit it, I'm a pastor. I am. I know, I don't look like it, but I am, I promise. There are churches that teach Christian supremacy. There are pastors who teach Christians are going to heaven and nobody else is. And the person in question that gathered us here asserted in the things that he wrote that he was doing the Lord's work. That is something all the Christians in the room, our job is to confess our sin. So I confess on behalf of myself for the ways in which I have failed to stand beside people of color, my Jewish and Muslim cousins, all those who are of no tradition, or some other group that we haven't named. We need to do better.
Good evening again, Vanessa Knox, Chair of Transformational Justice with Faith Coalition. We did recently meet with the chief, and we also met together with the leader, Officer Ron Cook, of the police union, and we're thankful for that. The only sustainable method to put a dent in this problem that is not only with Springfield Police Department, but through other city offices and other workers that deal with the public here in Springfield, is to change policy. Change policy. I have reviewed some of Springfield Police Department's policy, their conditions of employment. We did write a letter that included policy changes, what we're requesting to them and the city of Springfield for conditions of employment that will make it so uncomfortable for racists to want to work at Springfield Police Department, they will go somewhere else. It will make it very uncomfortable to work here, period. That is important. Policy change is the only sustainable method to put a dent in this. I'd like to thank Springfield Leaks. We don't hear too much about thanking them for bringing this to light with all the other reporters and journalists, anyone that did help with making this incredible issue so prevalent for everyone to see and read. I'm thankful for them with doing that. I again ask, please consider the policy changes that we submitted. Thank you for your time.
Just a quick comment, real quick. So we did meet with the Faith Coalition. I do appreciate providing the policy ideas that you have. And actually, I was approached by David Amerson, the union for the PBPA officers, and he actually, too, suggested that we change our policy for the better. And he came forward with ideas and suggestions that we're now working hand in hand to try and strengthen our own policy. So again, I'm all about ideas, suggestions on how we can move forward, and I think it certainly shows our willingness to strengthen policy. And I will say this, policy is exactly what forced this gentleman out the door, because he violated several of our policies. So we're committed, again, to strengthening any policy that we can, and I appreciate the union bringing forth their ideas as well.
Good evening, and thank you again for coming out to share your investigative attempts, whatever you have in place. I know that the speakers before me offered some suggestions, asked questions about what your plan is. I'm not trying to suggest that your plan that you have in place is not sufficient. I'm sure it is. However, my concern is disparate treatment of the members of this community. Black and brown people are the minority within this community, within the city. However, black and brown people are the majority in the prison system. That's a concern. You mentioned that you're willing to do whatever it takes to weed out those who have feelings of hate towards other groups, other ethnicities, so forth. And I'm hoping that you are also willing to do a wide range of investigations over all of the cases within Sangamon County, Springfield, Illinois, to determine whether or not black and brown, Asian, Hispanic people are being targeted. We have a saying, driving while black. And it's real to us. I know several years ago, I was riding with my dad on the west side of town, and an officer put on his lights and pulled us over. This was a training officer, I believe, and he had a FTO in the car, who watched him walk up to our vehicle with his hand on his weapon. For what reason? I don't know. But the FTO didn't do anything about it. So sometimes you have to look at who's training your officers as well. And it wouldn't hurt to review all of your officers' arrests, their citations, to determine whether or not there is a disproportionate rate of citations and arrests on black and brown people in this community.
So we're going to be respectful and finish with the people who are in line. Panel, you're okay with that? Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
My name is Dan Pittman. I'm a local coach here in town, so I'm kind of here because my kids are coming of age and driving around. I'm a Southeast alum, and basically my question kind of revolves around the next 10 years. There is a ton of stuff out there where we can look at statistical analysis for all kinds of information. I would go, the last lady talked about citation data, but we don't even talk about stop data. Like, how much do you stop and bother people, just as a general rule of thumb? I know if you stop out here while they let school out, you can always see police guys out. And I get it. My point being is, like, as we use data, I mean, a couple of high schoolers here could have found this guy's Snapchat, to be totally honest with you. Like, how are we going to move to the next 10 years, 20 years? How are we going to hold our police officers accountable in an age where we can go and find all this information ourselves? Springfield Leaks didn't do anything crazy. I work for a state agency. I track all kinds of numbers through our electronic data interchange. There is, I mean, I can find out if a barber messed up somebody's hair online, but I can't find out if a cop is out here hassling people on the street. So what are the things that you guys are willing to do over the next 10 years, 20 years to make sure that our selection and recruitment changes, to make sure that we're working with the CBA, to make sure that we're recording data, to make sure it's all of us can look at it? Like, what are the things that you guys are willing to make a commitment to doing?
I'll start with what we're willing to do with the police department. Well, let me explain what we do.
Last thing I would like to say too, my fault. I have a friend that works out at UIS, and he said to talk about a big immersion program too. And that's another thing that we don't do here. When I talk about emergency training, I'm talking about putting the police officers out in the communities. There's a big there's a big gap in wages from the east of 11th to west of 11th. So making sure that our officers are spending time in the communities that they're going to be policing. So I better mention that. I wanted to mention that one before you got started. Go ahead.
Good job.
Well, just real quick, let me answer that the second part. Community engagement is huge, has been. Again, I would tout the work that retired Chief Winslow was instrumental in developing community engagement. That's certainly a big part of my roadmap moving this agency forward. Listen, I think the ways to develop trust is having those non-law enforcement encounters with our officers and the community. I don't want the first time that you engage in a conversation with our officer to be when it potentially could be your worst day, right? Let's have conversations. Let's show that we're all human beings prior to that. So establishing trust in the community, ever so important, and you do that through non-law enforcement engagement. We've got several events that we have forthcoming. We partner with various organizations, the Outlet, Big Brothers and Sisters, you know, just all these groups to where we try and get out in the community, because I recognize the value in that. That's, if nothing else, establishing that trust to help us solve crime. That's ever so important. So I don't know if anyone had anything else to add to that.
So on the federal level, I think community policing is high priority of the administration. I think that's one of the ways that we're going to help restore the trust between the community and police officers. The federal government has funded community policing through the COPS program. That's going to continue, and hopefully that'll have some impact and some result in the near future.
So, man, I could go on and on.
Sorry, I'm most interested in you. I just feel like with stop data, I mean, when we evaluate police officers, you could use stop data. You could, I mean, when they evaluate me at work, they look at how, I mean, I deal with budget a lot, so they look at how many checks I signed and made sure I was paying for the right stuff. Like, so that kind of thing can be included in an employment evaluation.
So are you looking?
No, I was.
Oh, you're talking about me?
I mean, this could be a statewide.
I don't employ. I mean, I employ 22 investigators who do the investigations statewide. So I mean, and they don't stop any. You know, they don't do any stops. So although I did, as a legislator, enhance the
stop data law that we have in our state to be able to collect that data, which, you know, a lot of police departments have utilized that data to make self-assessments and so forth. I want to touch on what you talked about in terms of high schoolers being able to. And that's true. I mean, the high schoolers probably could detect it a whole lot better than I can. I could barely navigate my Facebook page, you know. But what I do want to say is, and I just, hate is on the rise. Hate is way on the rise, and it's getting to a dangerous place. And we have so many various platforms. You know, people left Twitter to go to, I forgot what the other one was called, Rumble or something like that. You know, so there are all of these new platforms that invite hate. You know, we had an insurgency on our Capitol largely because of communication and misinformation communicated on social media platforms. So it is out of control, and it's abundant. It is abundant, and it's dangerous. The pastor earlier talked about places of worship. My office partnered with the National Threat Assessment Center, Secret Service. So folks don't know that Secret Service does more than just protecting the president. We conducted seminars, and we intend to connect more as to warning signals, because when you think about an attack to a church, an attack to a school, the school resource officer, by the time the school resource officer is responding, number of people have been shot. So we got to have things in place, and you got to use the knowledge that is used to protect the president, right? If shared, can help prevent attacks on synagogues, on churches, on schools. And we've been in the process of trying to share some of that with administrators, parents, and community members, because it's information, those signals are signals that would be caught on social media exchanges, right? And so I'm not an expert at it. I don't put myself out as expert on it, but we've attached ourselves to people who are, and try to disseminate that information the best we can.
Thanks for you guys' time.
Thank you. Let me introduce this next gentleman. He is my alderman. Let's give it up for Sean Gregory, the youngest alderman, the most vocal alderman, the one who's making things happen on this side of 11th Street. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
I got you, cuz. This is my alderman. Sean?
Thank you. I appreciate you, Ms. Haley, all of our honorable guests in the room. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to come. I'm gonna take these off. These is for fashion, but whatever. but I think one of the things that we gotta really focus on is the trauma that this causes to me as a black man. And I could only imagine our Jewish friends, our transgender friends, our gay friends, and what it's done for them. So, one of the key things I wanted to preach, and guess what? It's taken me about 2 weeks, because everybody knows my history. We've got, I've had some history with the police from before I've been a alderman. It's been like a roller, the comic book movie things where the pages real fast. That's how it's been going for me. And you know what? My earliest memory of police was a good one. And then I flipped another page, and it's a bad one, and then it's a good one. So a man like me, we struggle sometimes with a stop, or you're immediately gonna go off. Because I think that this guy's a jerk like the last guy I talked to, or the last stop that I made. Or I read an Illinois Times article that says, a white guy says, I got pulled over, and heck, I think he was encouraged to have a gun. And for me, I flip another page. I'm like, well, shoot, I remember when I got pulled over, and asked that I was scared to death. I didn't have that. So what I'm preaching is an empathy from people who are in charge. Because I'll tell you what, when I knew Chief Scarlett was going to be chief before he knew he was going to be chief, not because nobody told me, but because he was the next in line and he was a stand-up guy. But let me talk about the guy before him. The guy before him was a stand-up guy. In fact, I know there was a little rift between him and the union. So that's why it is important for what you said and what our union members said as far as not tolerating that. Because before, the thought from our community is that, oh, chief gonna handle business, mayor always gonna handle business, that's why he's here. But the union gonna fight it and leave a bad cop around. So it's really, really important, and I'm so glad. That was the first thing I said, and guess what? Heck, I know some of them probably hate my guts, but I'm a man of real talk, and it's okay because I know we've had some tough conversations, and he's accepted them. There's an officer on the force, and we've had a blowout, but I know he can take a good yelling. So when I say that, that's what he gonna run into in the streets. So from my experience, when somebody comes to me and say, oh, well, he was this and that, I'm like, well, I've had some experience with him, and I know he has the patience. So there's some things that we'll do policy-wise, and we'll change, and we'll try to get better. We'll try to do some things to make sure that people, while they're on city's pay and law enforcement pay, that they do the right things. But the real change is going to come in the hearts and minds of the people who wear the badges and the guns. Are they really going to act with empathy? And I believe a good portion of them are. But to say that we don't have any jerks, that's a stretch, because we do. We got some, and guess what? People are humans. I've been a jerk before too. I've been outside of my body, and that's what people do. But we have to continue to stop it. We can't continue to go around and hear young black people say, or who anybody say, oh, I'm getting pulled over for tinted windows. My chief got tinted windows. I hate hearing that. It drives me nuts. CWLP has the, so those are the little things that help with trust. It's the little things that help with trust in the community. And there could be more, but I don't want to be here all night listening to me. I want us to go out into our community and really practice the things that we come in here to do. And that's be together and work together. So I appreciate you gentlemen and your time today. I appreciate everybody for coming out and taking the time and not leaving early, because guess what? You got to stay to the end to hear it all. And sometimes, even at council, I'll stay all night and talk to people, because that's our job. That's what we're here for. Sometimes, gosh, I'm waiting on a healing group from some people so we can just talk and get our feelings out and really do it, because sometimes you need to do that. I got multiple friends in the room, and we call them all the time and we vent. And so there's things that we must change that, guess what, they're inside the stinking law, but they ain't right. They're not right, excuse me. They're not right, and we got to stop practicing them if we want to try to move forward in a good way. So thank you.
Hi, my question is for Attorney General Rowe, and I want to thank you first for the work that you did in putting together the panel that's going to review discretionary removal of certifications, because my question is kind of a two-parter, and I don't want it to seem as if I don't understand the lift that must have taken. But in terms of that board, first off, my understanding of the Standards and Training Board is that it's primarily comprised of law enforcement. Are there citizens or non-governmental organizations or advocacy groups that are involved in this process? And then if there are, what protections are in place for their appointments if they are appointed? Or can you talk a little about that process? Because I'm sure some of us are familiar what happened with the Prisoner Review Board this past legislative cycle.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. 'Cause, well, let me just say that for right now.
and I wish I could more accurately answer your question, and I promise to do so, because I'm a little bit removed from, and I did sit through 25 meetings, literally 25 meetings, to do this. And this is before I had tried to do it some years earlier, because we had a law enforcement reform package back in, I want to say 2016, where I had proposed us doing it back then, and because we couldn't get a consensus on it, as the legislature often does, they have either a task force or a commission, so there was a commission on police professionalism that was formed, and they never came to a resolution on it, and that commission expired, and I introduced a bill to extend it. It was not taken up in the House. But there is a participation, civilian participation. I don't remember, I just confess honestly, I don't remember exactly what the makeup is or how they are designated, but that does exist, and I can get you, I can get you more specifics.
Yeah, I'll say
on that.
the perks of cell phones is I tried to review the legislation in the background as I was waiting to ask this question, and it looks like they're mostly advisory and that the final decision might lie with the board itself. But again, I don't know, I just read what I could. So any information that you could provide would be really wonderful. And thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Good evening. My question is directed to the chief. My name's Sam Cam, and I'm a lawyer. I don't have 22 investigators like Attorney General Raul. I don't
use
even
a
have
lot
one.
more.
I don't even have one investigator. So if I'm trying to get a hold of somebody, I don't have a phone number, an email. I go to Facebook or one of the other social media accounts, and most of the time I find the person there. So my question to the chief is, you've got about, I think, 200 officers, something like that. Do you have anyone in your department that's going through the Facebook accounts or other social media accounts of each officer and who has an account and seeing what they're posting and trying to root out, be proactive and try to root out officers who may be making racist, anti-Semitic, or anti-Muslim posts proactively?
Well, the answer to that is no, and just what happened in this particular case here, the gentleman is using, and I don't know the terms because I'm not a social media guy, but several different handles or something that's not associated with his name, and he makes specific comments that if they ever find out who I am, I'll be fired. So clearly there is, in this particular case, was that theory that deception may allow him the ability to move on. So
I understand a lot of people may be posting racist rants under pseudonyms, but you'd be surprised how many people post racist and hateful posts under their own name. So I think if you looked, you might find something. Just a suggestion. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is April Poole. I'm a member of the Coalition of Rainbow Alliances, one of the other gay organizations in town, okay? As a member of the LGBTQIA, we are the last minority who have had their rights infringed upon to live openly, to work openly, and to love openly. Coral stands in support of our Black, brown, Jewish, Muslim brothers and sisters to uncover and fight this type of hate displayed by this officer. However, we still believe that there are many more in our ranks, not only in this city, but also in this county. And while I appreciate the city being here, we also needed to have representation from the county in this. I have two things that I'd like to know about. First, are there any procedures or processes that you are reviewing or have changed in the last 2 weeks, which is kind of hard to do in the 2 weeks, I understand, that can help determine in the hiring process if a police candidate is racist or bigoted or however you'd like to say, or has racist tendencies. Now, I am specifically looking at the racist tendencies in the fact that all of us are born non-racist. We are not racist when we are born. This is a learned trait, activity, belief, whatever you want to say. So, are we also investigating, and it's kind of hard to probably to do this, I understand that, but families, organizations, churches that they attend, anything else that they may do on a Friday or Saturday night that may influence them. And the reason why I'm bringing up hiring practices is there was a former Springfield police officer that moved from Springfield to another smaller community. It was not Grandview. It was not even anywhere in this Sangamon County, was not anywhere in the neighboring counties, okay? So, and 2 police officers came to ask us questions about the integrity of this police officer, as my partner and I were neighbors, and my partner gave a glowing recommendation. I had reservations because of their offhand comments. However, the 2 officers were fully armed and intimidating and so forth. Are we having people look into members of the community like the like the Citizens Review Board possibly helping in this hiring process to really find out? Because, and I believe Sunshine is on that committee, I would go to her and say, I have reservations about that person being hired. Also, that's the first one. Second one is, I know that a long time ago, the Springfield Police Department, all officers were trained in LGBT sensitivity training that was led by the late Buff Carmichael and by Peggy Poole. That training stopped after 2 or 3 years. I'm just trying to make sure that that continues and that we have yearly training on how to deal with the LGBTQIA community, along with all the other communities represented in this room.
Okay, well, let me see if I can answer some of these questions. So we talked a little bit about policy change and how we're, Faith Coalition, I think this is Vanessa, she brought forth some policies. We're working through that. The union mentioned strengthening policies. So yes, has anything changed in 2 weeks? No. Is that something that we're in the process of reviewing? You betcha. As far as the hiring process, so essentially, as you describe it, I think one of our officers probably got hired somewhere else, and as part of a background investigation, which is standard, let's say he was being hired for our agency, we send our detectives out who do background investigations, and part of the normal course of that is they review this background investigation. They go interview people that you say you list as your references, and then they develop a reference beyond that. That's part of our background process. Trying to make sure I cover all this. And then as far as the hiring process, we also have a psychological evaluation where some of the questions oriented are towards bias and racism, as well as the Minnesota multiphasic test is one component of that. So there are several parts of the hiring process that are geared towards trying to figure an individual out.
May I interrupt that for just a second?
Sure.
Those tests, there are ways out on the internet that you can find to beat those tests. I'm sorry. I understand.
I don't deliver those. That's the psychologist.
Okay.
We send our prospective candidates to a psychologist company, and they administer those tests. They do the doctors do that. Much smarter than I am. Individuals do that. So, but that's part of that hiring process. One component that we've added is social media checks. We do that now. Now, do we dig down 10 or 12 layers? Probably don't do as robust as we should, but social media check is part of our hiring process as well. Did I answer all those?
You can meet her on the sideline.
Okay, perfect, sorry.
Let's give April a hand. Before this next gentleman speaks, I'm going to ask Marcus Johnson to come up and join me and make closing comments, sir. So go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is Calvin Christian. I wasn't originally going to speak or address tonight, but I decided that I just feel compelled to, because, and I'm going to say this, the Springfield Police Department has a race issue. From, I want to say maybe the last 2-3 years, this is about the 5th incident that I've heard about. The first one is a now fired cop who sent a racial message to another cop through an in-car computer. That cop eventually was fired from the Springfield Police Department and then got hired to the Grandview Police Department. Another cop was arresting a black male and repeatedly repeated back to him because the male was calling the officer the N-word. And then the officer repeated the N-word back to the black male. Not only that, but a black female officer found a black disfigured doll in the armory room, which led to the cameras being installed. Not only that, but an officer who tased a black pregnant woman. During his investigation to IA, he told the internal affairs investigators that he was having a bad day. That ticket was eventually filed by Dan Wright's office, and after the media reported it, within, I want to say, maybe about a month, the ticket was pretty much dropped for insufficient evidence. And now we have this Aaron Nichols incident. But something that I wanted to really kind of point out is that a lot of these incidents were private. They were hidden in internal affairs records. But it wasn't until the media found out about the incident and then released it to the public. So instead of complaining about it, I really want to present an ideal and a suggestion to you, as well as Mayor Langfelder and all the alderwomen and aldermen that are in the building tonight. How about going forward, all internal affairs files are now placed on the city's website once the investigation is complete. Not only that, but maybe even start going back within the 4 years of the files that you guys have, because I think these files are important to be placed in the public so we know what our officers are doing in private, what other people who are complaining about these officers are saying about these officers. Because I feel as though if the media is the only one asking for these files, and they're only asking because they're hearing things or they're getting tipped off, they're the only ones asking for it. So me, frankly, I don't know how many other complaints or racial complaints have been filed within these past 4 years, but there's a problem, and going forward, and even going back the last 4 years, it needs to be placed on the city's website for us to see. Thank you.
So there's no need to respond to that at this moment. I'm going to ask Marcus Johnson, the youngest executive director for the Springfield Urban League. Let's give him a hand.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Teresa Haley and everyone here who shared their comments and used their voice to bring truth to light. I know that is something that is quite difficult to do at times, but it is something that we must continue to do to hold our community accountable for taking care of our community. We all have a collective voice. We have to learn how to use it. We're all here today to use it. There are plenty of other individuals that should be here using their voice to bring truth to light. And so once we leave from this place, we must continue to press upon their hearts to do that so that we can afford justice to those who have not had it in their lives. So I thank you all for the opportunity, and I look forward to having tough, uncomfortable, but necessary conversations to move us forward. Thank you.
So closing comments, maximum 2 minutes. Yes, Mark. Mark is a current police officer with the Park District.
Okay, I came up here because I want y'all all to be able to see me. Y'all can't see me if I'm sitting down there. But what I want to tell you, and this is serious, I appreciate these gentlemen, I appreciate these leaders, I appreciate the public, I appreciate your concern, because I'm not just on the outside looking in, I'm also on the inside looking out. And your concerns that you have as far as with the racism and everything, it do take a toll on everybody of all colors. I'm also a member of the NAACP. I'm also a police officer here in Springfield. And when I took oath of office, my oath of office was to keep you protected, not based on the color of your skin. When we hear, like we heard Blue Lives Matter, I can agree with that. Black Lives Matter, I can agree with that. White Lives Matter, I can agree with that. All lives matter, I can agree with that. But it's sad at times when you have to remain people that Black Lives Matter is part of the All Lives Matter. I wear a uniform, and at the end of the day, I like to be able to return home to my wife, my family, my kids, my grandkids, like any other decent officer would like to do. And there's a lot of stress involved in law enforcement. Look how many law enforcement officers commit suicide because they can't deal with the mental stress. But here's the voice that you hadn't heard. Imagine that when I get off work and I have to go home, and I got officers that wear the same uniform that I wear, and they hate me because of the color of my skin. That's not how we solve the problem. We got to be united. And if we go let division because of the color of a person's skin stop you from upholding the office that you promised to do, we got a problem. And you will have officers who some are scared to make their concerns because they feel they're going to be retaliated. I don't worry about that because I don't retire twice. Okay. But the thing is, you know, Teresa Haley said a long time ago, and I said today, you see something, you say something. If you don't say something, how's the leaders here gonna know? So when you see something, you say something. I thank everybody for coming out here. It makes me feel good as a police officer to hear what your concerns are, because it helps me better to address and know what it is that's bothering you. I want to be able to be of assistance to everybody. And the only way we're going to get the job done, we're going to have to move racism out the way, because that's going to be a constant block for us achieving the things that we need to do. So I thank you all. Everything that you had to say means a lot to me. God bless you, the leaders. I thank y'all all.
Okay, closing comments. I heard time there, so I'm going to make sure I pay attention, so go for it. Yes.
I'll be happy to start. Thank you all for being here tonight. I not only as a state's attorney, but just as a citizen of Springfield, I appreciate you all being here, and not just the people that are here, but people who are watching wherever this is being broadcast. I hope that parents out there who are watching this remember how important it is. Somebody said racism is not innate when we're born, and it's important, the example that we set at home, the example we set in our community just as people, to do our part to root that out from the beginning, from a young age. And as state's attorney, I think it's absolutely critical to not sit in your office and not be engaged with the community, and we heard somebody else mention a silo. That is something that is really important to me. I want to thank every single person who spoke tonight. We were all listening, and we appreciate you listening to what we said and knowing that you will hold us accountable to our words. I think I'm sure that I speak for everybody that's here. I'll let them speak for themselves, but we mean what we say up here tonight, but we don't expect you to take our word for it. I think we intend to be thorough and responsible and transparent in what we've said that we plan to do to address this, but also be vigilant to do everything within our power to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because there is no community in this country or in the world that should have to encounter a law enforcement officer with the beliefs that this person espoused, whether publicly or privately. There should be a zero tolerance for that kind of behavior. There's no place for that in our community. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
Let's give him a hand. Thank you. I was getting ready to call time on you, Dan. You just made it.
Talk about holding me accountable. I know you will, Teresa.
All right. Thank you, Teresa, and thanks the Faith Coalition and the Jewish Federation, and thank everybody for coming out. It's very important for us to hear what you have to say. As I said in the beginning when I started, I'm here to learn from the community, and I think I've had wonderful speakers to come up and talk about the things that are concerning to them. One of the things that I think our alderman Gregory said about, he started off talking about how hate crimes affect us all. And you don't have to be stopped by a police officer, you don't have to be spitted at, you don't have to be called a name, but when you read about those things, it affects you. It affects your mood, it affects your feeling, your trust for the community. You know, it gets you angry. And those are things that we need to eliminate. And I just wanted to echo what the Attorney General said in terms of this affecting everybody. And I quote, "These hate crimes and other bias-related incidents instill fear across the entire communities and undermine the principles upon which our democracy stands. All people in this country should be able to live without fear of being attacked or harassed because of where they are from, what they look like, whom they love, and how they worship." And I just wanted to say that because I think the Attorney General gets it, the department gets it, and we're going to try and do everything in our power to investigate and prosecute any hate crimes. And one final thing, if you come across an incident, again, report those things. We have a civil rights hotline, the Department of Justice does. It's area code 313-226-9151. Again, area code 313-226-9151, or you can use the civil rights email address, which is civilrights@usdoj.gov, as well as an FBI hotline, which is area code 217-522-9675. So thank you again very much for inviting me, and I hope we can continue this dialogue. Thank you.
So before the chiefs speak, I sent my cousin, Alderman Roy Williams. You need to come to the mic. Thank you, sir. I had to blast you out. Chief?
Well, sure, I'll be brief. Again, thanks everyone for the opportunity to come speak. And someone mentioned the difficult conversations, extremely difficult, and it's a feeling of vulnerability sitting up here. But as the leader of the organization, the Springfield Police Department, the buck stops with me, and I take full ownership in the men and women and what we do, and I take responsibility, and I want you to know that there'll be swift and decisive action if this egregious action ever happens again. To steal a word from Mr. Harris, I'm affected by what transpired, but more importantly, the men and women that are out there serving and protected on a daily basis are now affected. They've got to go out and continue to answer calls for service, and they're in a very difficult position right now. So I applaud the work that they do. Our agency is full of wonderful and great police officers, and I'm proud of them. And the wonderful and great police officers will help me ensure that there are no bad ones. And you have my word moving forward that we will work hand in hand with the community to regain trust, reestablish partnerships, and move forward from this terrible incident. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Attorney General?
Yeah, I suppose what I want to leave you with is, and the U.S. Attorney said, I get it. I get it. I get it personally, right? I'm not just sitting before you as Attorney General. I'm sitting before you as somebody who's been a black man since birth, right? And so as a young legislator, I remember sitting at the Globe when I was having a beer after hours. And the two gentlemen came up to me, and during the course of the conversation that I decided to have an extended one with them, the N-word was used maybe about 30 or 40 times. But I just decided to just engage in conversation. I learned that one of the gentlemen was a retired Chicago police officer. On the heels of George Floyd's murder, I wrote a letter to my staff. And I said, you know, and during these times, everybody's reflecting and trying to point the finger of blame. And I said, I point the finger at myself because how much I've tolerated without speaking out about, you know, and I talked about in my campaign for Attorney General how I refrained from being passionate about talking about everything because for fear of being perceived an angry black man. When in fact there's a lot to be angry about if you think about the history of experiences that I've had personally, that my son and my stepson and my daughters for that matter have experienced. And so I get it, and I take that getting it to my everyday duty as Attorney General, and that's why I wrote that letter to my staff. So they can not only listen to my experiences, but they can listen to yours.
At this time, Alderman Williams, I'm going to ask you to give us closing remarks, and Nancy to come back up, and then we're going home.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm going to be short because you all know I'm Roy Williams, Alderman Ward 3, represent the best side of the east side.
Okay, I'm going to have to move back out now.
And I want to thank you leaders, because it's so important to get people of your stature to come to a meeting like this. Just shows that you care and how important the issue is. I want to thank everybody who came out tonight, because it's so important to come together as community to push back on what happened and what took place. I see it going on all over the country. It was hard to imagine that it was going to actually finally happen in Springfield, but it did. But it's nothing we can't get through if we do what we're doing tonight. Democracy requires participation, and that's what we're doing. We're participating because we care. God bless.
Nancy, come on up. So this is really what democracy looks like. The other thing we're going to ask our police department to do is to reinstall or reinstate residency requirement. Police officers should live in the community in which they serve and protect. So we will be meeting with the police union. We will meet with any and everyone. We ask you all to meet with your legislators, your aldermen, women and men, and let's hold our city council accountable. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Nancy?
I want to first thank Teresa for pulling this together, because it was really Teresa who lit the fire and got it going, and recognizing that as a city of Springfield who does not want to tolerate hate, who doesn't tolerate hate, because I heard that from everybody in this room and everybody over here, we can leave, at least those are of us who are in the room now, those are who are watching, and those who believe we can begin to fight hate, and we can be united as we do it. And thank you all, and thank you.
Good night, everyone. Please get together with your prospective organizations and continue this conversation. Our police chief said that he's available to meet with any group regarding policies and procedure changes, and we want to make sure that we're doing our part. And we want to thank all of our organizational partners for coming out tonight.